Hey everybody, it's Gail, and I have an entire table covered in yarn in front of me, and I wanted to let you know what you can expect to see coming from this entire table of yarn, some of which is not on camera. And also I wanted to explain to you why I chose the yarns I chose, because these are all for vintage patterns, and so you gotta start, it's that mix and match you gotta do if you love the vintage pattern but that yarn doesn't exist anymore. And so I've done a lot of digging on a lot of yarns, which I will get to talking about in a moment, to have answers to the projects I want to make. So first up, I have 3 skeins of, this is Curio number 10 thread from Knit Picks and We Crochet. And you might remember a while back I did a video where I showed you all my in progress stuff and all my buckets. And I was using this for a different project, but I fell out of love with that project shortly after I made that video. And so I have repurposed this thread for this very cute, it's called Design 674. It is an open work sweater. And this design is from the 60s or maybe the 70s. It's a little hard to tell. But it was a mail order design, and so you would, I assume, send in a little card that said, I want to sign up for your mail order patterns, and they would get sent out from any number of places. Let me see, I don't believe this one actually names, yes, this one doesn't name the company that did this. But what they would do on these mail order patterns, because they were meant to kind of just be sent out to anybody who wanted them, was to make the yarns as generic as possible. So what it's calling for is a mercerized cotton, crochet and knitting cotton, or a 3-ply fingering yarn. Based on the size of the hook, they're recommending if you're doing the mercerized crochet and knitting cotton, I believe that a size 10 thread is going to get me the right numbers. I'll find out when I actually sit down and start making the thing up and working my gauge. And that's very important when you're working with modern yarns that are for vintage projects, is you always got to check your gauge. And I'm one of those people, I hate doing a gauge swatch, but oh, it's so important. Okay, I've had to restart stuff in the vintage pile a lot because I did not, do the smart thing and just make a fucking gauge swatch. Oh, my voice is going. It's very polleny here today. All right, so the next one, let's do the shiny one. So what I have here is Cocktail Deluxe from Go Handmade. I ordered this from Hobby. And it was originally, what was being called for originally was Reynolds Feu d'Artifice. I never got good marks for my pronunciation in French. And so I have a huge amount of this, which I'm very excited about, because the yarn is originally a metallic fingering weight, which is what this is. And I'm going to make this very charming 1960s top and skirt with it. I'm especially interested to make it, not just because it's sparkly, I do like a good sparkle, but because it doesn't show you the finished product in the pattern. You don't get like a full body shot of it, which is pretty rare. So I think I know what it's going to look like. It looks like it's, the kind of the classic 60s silhouette of, very circular, drop straight down. Which probably means I need to do an ass measurement. So, we will see what we see. And of course I'm putting all of these into the same location where I destashed semi-recently, now that I have all this space. All right, so that's that one. The next one is I have yellow and I have red, and we are making a 1950s off-shoulder peasant patio dress. That is the exact name of the pattern. Peasant dress just meant it looks very Italian. This was the Italian influence around the time, like a peasant dress with big full skirt, low cut. Well, low cut for the 50s. It was you know, it was a little sexy, a little daring. And what I have here is DMC Petra number 5, and it is replacing J&P Knit Crocheting. And this, let me tell you, man, finding out that J&P Knit Crocheting was a size 5 thread has made so many vintage patterns of mine understandable now, because they don't tell you it's a size 5 when they call it out in the vintage patterns, because they would have assumed you would know. Or not necessarily that you would know it was a size 5, but that you bought the knit crocheting because that's what they told you to buy. And so I have a vintage hat pattern that I made last year that did not fit. It was way too small. And I thought the problem was that heads were slightly smaller back in the day. And now I think the problem is that heads were slightly smaller, but also I used a size 10 instead of a size 5, and when you're working with thread, the smaller the number, the thicker the thread. So a size 5 is double that of a size 10. So that's gonna make a difference. But I'm really looking forward to this dress. I've had this pattern forever. Also, Second Look Vintage, who sells this pattern on Etsy, does always note the kind of yarn that you will need in order to complete the pattern successfully, and so I love that, and that's why I know why it's a size 5 thread, because Second Look Vintage said so. I will link to that Etsy shop. I have another pattern here that is also from them, but it is no longer on the shop, which is too bad. But that's okay. You know, you sell what you sell. Alright, next one. Oh, let's do this one. Alright, so in case you were worried that I had not talked about a 1970s pattern for this video so far, it's okay. Because I have Curio number 3 from Knit Picks and We Crochet, and it is for a 1970s bikini pattern. I went through a massive purchase of swimsuit patterns recently. They're just so addicting. They're so cute. So this is originally from Twilly's Crochet, made with Twilly's Crochet, and this is a very good thing to know. Twilly's is a British company. So if you ever go looking at Twilly's vintage patterns, all of the yarn weights and all of the terminology is going to be in British terms. So just be prepared for that if you work with Twilly's. They're going to use those British terms, so a double crochet is a single crochet if you're American, etc. When I was vintage pattern shopping, I wasn't paying attention to any of that for the longest time. And so I had this huge chunk of patterns that are from Britain or Australia. And it leads me to having to remind myself, if I'm working on an American pattern, that I got to switch back my terms to what they are in the States to actually make things correctly. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this swimsuit. I think it's very cute. I will have to do the ass spansion, as you will, because in the 1970s, apparently no one had an ass. So, you know, good times. All right, next up we have, what is the exact name of this? Because I always get because it's an abbreviation. It's Kobasai, which is a cotton bamboo silk blend. I got this in 2 colors for this adorable off-shoulder 1950s blouse that is actually fairly similar in terms of how it's designed along the top to the peasant dress. So, you know, kind of going for the same vibe there. And I got it in blue and green, because I needed something to do the stripes, and I probably bought too much green, but that's never stopped me before. So this is actually a Tunisian pattern, which they refer to as using an Afghan hook, which is another name for Tunisian. And this is the other Second Look Vintage pattern, so that's why I know exactly what I needed, which was a fingering weight yarn, which this is. I got this beautiful stuff from Starlight Knitting Society here in Portland, and I will link to their storefront down below. It's a lovely shop. Mostly knitting, but they, obviously from the name, but they were great to me. No notes. Originally, the yarn was called Bishop's Fancy, Fansay, which I really like fancy, not just fancy, but fancy, you see. Ah! I've got yarn ends going everywhere. All right, I'm actually just gonna put these here so I don't have to dig around in the closet right now. But yeah, super cute. Looking forward. I haven't worked Tunisian in forever. I've only ever worked it vaguely in terms of like very small stuff or just testing stuff. So, you know, it'll be fun to do a whole top like that. Next up here we have Java, which is a cotton polyester viscose ribbon yarn. And we have this to make this glorious 1960s mod dress. We're doing the mini skirt, and this called for Brene Mignette, I think, Mignette, Mignette, knitting ribbon. And so knitting ribbon is something that you see pretty regularly in older patterns. Numata had a lot of them. You know, obviously Brene had a knitting ribbon. And if you remember way back, Lion Brand used to have the Lion Brand Incredible line, which was all knitting ribbon. And it's mostly gone away again. It's gotten the way of a lot of other novelty yarns again, which is too bad. I know Ice Yarns has a lot of options, but they also have to ship from Iceland. So it can take a little time, be a little expensive. I got this Java here off of Hobby, along with the yarn I mentioned earlier. And shipping was, I think shipping was free because I spent that much money. But it's not hard to hit the shipping minimums for Hobby. Especially if what you need is like a whole lot of ribbon yarn, which I did. And now I have it. And then lastly, we have an absolute shit ton of swish worsted from Knit Picks and We Crochet, and this is for a sweater that I will be making for Sean. It originally called for No Miss Excellence 80/20, and they don't tell you what the 80/20 is, but it was probably wool acrylic if I had to guess, or possibly wool nylon. And so I just went ahead and got my hands on Swish, which is 100% superwash wool. So I think it'll work out very similarly. I'm excited to do that pattern because of all the front post stitches. It is another 1970s pattern, but Sean should get to enjoy the 1970s too. But also the 1970s was like peak sweater. Like some seriously nice sweater shit going on in the 70s. So that's what's going to happen with all of this yarn, and you know, these projects will show up on the channel when they show up. I never know when I'm going to start something new right now. I think I'm at 8 projects in the buckets in the living room, so getting closer to getting to start a new one. The other thing I wanted to tell you, so I know which yarns to match, which modern yarns to match with which vintage yarns, because I have a big spreadsheet on Google that I have spent a lot of time filling out and researching yarn sizes and yarn names and looking at old yarns on eBay and trying to make a good guess. You know, a Purple Kitty yarn has a vintage yarn list, so does Free Vintage Crochet. And so just over time piecing together a lot of these that seem like they're going to fit together. And I have now taken that entire spreadsheet and it is on my website for anybody to use, icrochetedthething.com. There's just a page for it. And it was a little bit of effort to get it up there, but I think it's just such a good resource. I don't want to keep it to myself. I don't want you to have to worry that like I might eventually delete the link or something. Like you can go and copy and paste it for yourself wherever you want. If you do use it in terms of like how you find a yarn for something and you know you blog about it or make a video about it, I would enjoy a shout out. But I'm not going to go around tracking down everybody. So you know, you do you. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. I'm glad to finally have that resource out there. And as always, I continue with the vintage pattern errata on I Crochet the Thing. Just whenever I stumble into a vintage pattern error. So if you are working vintage patterns and have found an error in something and it's not on my website, feel free to shoot me the info and I would be happy to add it. It just makes it easier to work with these vintage patterns when we know if it's us or maybe it was the pattern. Yep, that's what I got for you today. As always, if you enjoy what I do here, please like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. And I update about every 10 days, so I'll see you in about 10 days.